Hi guys, so today's video is going to be both a non-spoiler book review and then a spoilery chat for House of Salt and Sorrows, which is the debut novel by Erin A. This story is a fairy tale retelling of a fairy tale that I'm not familiar with whatsoever. It is the 12 Dancing Princesses. I know nothing about that fairy tale, so I went into this only knowing the premise, which is that there is this family that is very well off. They're a bunch of sisters, and they live in this mansion basically by the sea with their dad. Their mom's dead, and some of the sisters are dead, and people think their family is cursed because they just keep on dying. The book opens really fantastically. It has this very somber, sad feel because one of the sisters has just died. She's not the first one to have died, but their stepmother is kind of like, it's always sad up in here, you guys need to be happier. So she insists that instead of going through with the mourning period, which generally lasts a year, and it keeps lasting because they keep dying, she's like, we need to focus on celebration and being happy. And they're like, all right, fine, we'll try to be happy. And they end up stumbling across this magical door that leads them to a bunch of extravagant balls. And they're like, I guess we'll go dancing and try to meet some boys to feel better about all our dead sisters. If that's not a fairy tale way of handling your grief, then I don't know what is, because I don't think I would want to go dancing if my sister had just died. But the one sister, our main character, she's kind of a little bit more reasonable, and she's like, guys, our sister just died. I feel like maybe she was murdered and we should check it out. And they're like, she's fine, she's dead, she didn't get murdered, she just fell down off a cliff. And so that's kind of the setup. And then things start to get really crazy from there. As far as I can tell, this is marketed as young adult fantasy, which it is fantasy. There's fantastical elements in the story, but I was not expecting the horror elements, which it could be considered fantasy horror because there are some really creepy scenes. Now, I'll admit, I'm a total pansy. I'm a wimp when it comes to creepy stuff. I don't really read very many creepy books, so maybe if you are really well versed in the horror genre, you won't be creeped out at all. But I did talk to another booktuber, my friend Jade from Bedtime Bookworm, who does read a fair amount of horror, and she thought some of the creepy scenes were also pretty creepy. So it wasn't just me and my pansy self. The horror elements definitely mess with your mind. It kind of almost turned it into a thriller as well, because you really were at a loss for what the heck was happening for a lot of the book, which I thoroughly enjoyed. So much of the story I was thinking, how on earth are these things happening? What is going on? And I really liked that about the story. I do think that, without giving away spoilers in the non-spoiler portion of this, that how things are or are not resolved may not be to everybody's liking, but I had a ton of fun reading this book. I was creeped out. I was constantly wondering what was going on. It made me want to turn the page. And I think the writing style itself, which is often very atmospheric, I thought it was really well done. It definitely pulls from the fact that they live in this manor by the sea, and the sea itself plays such a big part in their lives and how things are described, which I thought was done really, really well. There is a little bit of a romance in the story, and for me personally, I didn't think it needed a romance. I wouldn't say I was really upset by it, but the romance to me just kind of felt like it was there because why not? But it wasn't poorly done. I just don't know that I cared for that portion of the book. Maybe those of you that love romance will like it, or for those of you that don't, maybe you'll be frustrated by it. So just kind of letting you know, the romance I think is going to be hit or miss for a decent amount of people. Also, the sisters themselves, because there's a bunch of them, they don't really have that distinctive personalities from one another. I actually found I would get confused with the sisters, not just because there was a lot of them, but because so many of them kind of acted the same. They handled certain situations the same. Annalie was basically the only one that was a little different, and she was just kind of thinking, what if my sister was murdered? That's like really the only thing that sets her apart, is that she doesn't really want to go dancing and get new shoes and stuff as much as her other sisters do. But all her sisters were a hint vain, maybe a lot vain, and a lot of them were very boy crazy, and which is fine, but it's just there's so many of them, and a lot of them had that personality trait. And I was waiting for one of them to not be so thirsty. They were so thirsty, and And it just, I don't know, I thought there would be at least one that was like boys suck or something, because when you get that many people together, one of them is bound to be a little bit different from the others. I would say the only one that was really that different to me was the really tiny sister, because she's too little to really be vain and care about boys yet. So she was really the only one that was that distinct in my mind. But again, I still found that the story, it wasn't really focused on all the different sisters and their personalities. It was more on this sort of kind of murder mystery, or maybe not, and all the really trippy, creepy stuff that starts happening. I think that is really the thing about the story, that if you're going to like it, you'll like it for those reasons. It's a very weird book for me to talk about, because even though I enjoyed it so much, I could definitely see other people not really liking it that much, and I could see if they mentioned the exact same things that I didn't love about the book, I could understand why that would drag it down for them a lot. So, I mean, I really liked it, and I had so much fun with it, and I was freaking out quite a few times reading this, but I think it is going to be one that some people, if they take it a little too seriously, they're not going to like it as much. So take that with a grain of salt. No pun intended. Now moving into the spoiler portion of this video. Okay, stop watching now. This story, I really did have so much fun with it, and I really was creeped out. And this is maybe strange. This is a strange reason for me to like this book, but the things that creeped me out about it made me think about my mom. I need to explain because that sounds really strange. So when I was a kid, I didn't used to be such a wimp when it came to scary stuff, but my mom's always been kind of a wimp. Her and I would watch scary things together, just the two of us, and we'd be like, ah, and my mom especially would be like, oh my gosh, ah, and she'd be like freaking out a bunch in just the most happy, fun way. You know, she wasn't one of those people that tried to act super tough. Like, she would let the creepy stuff just have her go in a frenzy. And it was so fun for me, and so when I was reading this, I just kept thinking about handing it to my mom and being like, Mom, you need to read this so that we can talk about the creepy stuff. And then I just imagine her being like, oh my gosh, the scene with the bathtub, or the scene with the little sister seeing all the pictures, and that kind of stuff. I just feel like my mom would freak out, and it's one of those things that you can freak out with other people together, and I know that's what you do with a lot of horror books, but I don't like super, super creepy stuff, and I love fantasy. So for me, I really liked that this was a combination of both without being too disturbing. I did think the bathtub scene was super creepy. The one with the the triplets, and there's only one left, and Annalise in the bathtub, and the sister's just staring at her, not saying anything. Oh my gosh, that scene. Any bathtub scenes. As soon as they would mention a bathtub, I was like, don't take a bath, girl. Just be dirty. Stay dirty and smelly. There's the ocean out there. Just rinse yourself off if you need to out there. Like, don't go in the bathtub. That's especially when one of the sisters died in the bathtub. Like, why would you go back into that bathtub? Moving aside from this creepy stuff, because I feel like that's all I'm going to be talking about for this video, I with the romance stuff, I didn't love Cassius. I just felt very neutral toward him because I didn't know if he was good or bad. And anytime I don't know if the love interest is good or bad, I don't let myself get attached to them. So maybe if I were to reread it, I would like Cassius more. But on top of that, I really liked her friend, Fisher. And when they introduced him, I was like, oh, how sweet. It'll be friends to lovers. And I thought it was going to be that kind of thing. And it talked about how she used to have feelings for him. But then for some reason, she was like, earlier today, I saw this really hot guy at the docks. So I guess I don't really like Fisher anymore. That's what it felt like a little bit. And I think it was just more of she always kind of saw him a certain way, and then seeing him again, she was filled with these warm, fuzzy feelings toward him, but they weren't necessarily romantic, which was fine. And it also worked out because it turned out he was dead the whole time. But I don't know, that part of me is like, I wish that just hadn't been set up that way at all then. I kind of just wish he'd have come back and she was like, Fisher, I missed you. And he'd be like, I miss you too, Annalie. And then they could just be friends or brother-sister type relationship. That's kind of what I wish would have happened with them. I'm curious, for those of you who have read it, if you guessed that the stepmother was the one behind all the craziness. I felt like it was so obviously her that I didn't guess it because I didn't think it could be her. Anytime somebody's that obviously the one, then you know, most of us are like, well, it's not them. They're just a distraction. Maybe it's the dad. Maybe it's the other sister. You know, that's kind of what happens with me anyway. Maybe you guys just thought through it. But I was pretty sure it was her, and then I wasn't sure. And when I got to around page 300-ish, 320, when they go to the lighthouse and then they see Fisher's dead and they find out about the trickster and this goddess of nightmares and madness and whatever, I started to get really disappointed because I hate when I can't figure out the mystery. There's no way I can figure it out. That always really frustrates me. But then when they brought it back as, oh, but somebody you know had to have summoned us, then I was like, okay, I'm on board again. And then when she goes back to the house to explain everything to her family, I was thinking as the reader, I'm going to just be so frustrated with all the siblings in a good way. Like, oh, they're not going to believe her and it's going to be so aggravating. But then all of a sudden Cassius wasn't around, and then all their sisters didn't know who he was. And they're like, Fisher died a while ago. What are you talking about? And then I started to question, like, is she crazy? Is this all in her head? And I really enjoyed that the author, even after telling us what was up, still made me question. That's pretty hard to do. Maybe I'm just a dummy, but I appreciated that. Obviously, there were magical elements to the story because of the door thing. And then it turned out the door wasn't really actually even there the whole time. It was this goddess. But I still wish that the author maybe had written the magical elements a little more where we could recognize that it was potentially them that were behind it, because they would mention gods and goddesses, but I was still very unsure if it was more of a belief or if it really was something that the gods just happened to walk up onto their island and stuff. I didn't know for a while, and maybe I just should have read it a little clearer, but I do still kind of, I think I would have liked if I had known that it was a possibility, and then maybe I could have pieced it together and those elements could have been hinted at a little bit more earlier in the story. But all those little things that maybe will bring the book down for a lot of other people, I don't even care. Those things just didn't even matter. I just had so much fun. Anyway, that is it for my non-spoiler and then spoilery chat and review for House of Salt and Sorrows. I really did enjoy this book so much, even though I can see it maybe not being that enjoyable for a lot of other people. I just think that I haven't had this much fun reading a book in so long, and there's definitely a place for books like that in my reading. Hopefully there is for you all too, and I hope you'll enjoy it if you pick it up. But anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.